Welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang and Simon. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushel. Bush, how are you doing on this Sunday in May?
I'm fine, thank you. It's not any particular special Sunday in May, but actually I shouldn't say that. Here in Vancouver, it's the Vancouver Marathon is taking place today, so it's going to be chaos attempting to walk anywhere, which means it won't be fun trying to get around the city.
There was a marathon in Toronto as well. A few of my friends ran it, so shout out to people who run. It sucks, so it takes a true commitment to actually do it. Won't acknowledge any other sports that happened or may not have happened this week, Simon, but heartbreak for your Leeds, who will have to go through the playoff crucible. How are you feeling about that?
Not good. I don't think they're going to make it through the playoff gauntlet. I've seen a lot of stuff written about this, that they choked away the end of their season. And I actually think that is true. I'm not going to let them off the hook on this, but it is the highest point total ever earned by a team and not got automatic promotion in championship history, which is quite a feat. And I think it does go to show you how good value Leicester and Ipswich are to go up to the Premier League. Like they definitely earned it. This is not two teams lucking into being promoted. So, Leeds came up short. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I'm not hopeful, but, fair play to those teams that went up.
I was thinking about the playoffs and the format and the so-called most profitable game in football, which is the championship playoff, the final at Wembley, after these semifinals are done. And the stakes involve like £200 million, basically, for the club that goes up. It's a big deal. And I think that makes, like, the championship is insane and there's so many games. And then you have to go through this playoff. Like, it's a bit nuts. And I can see how fans really are spent by the end of it. But it led me to think about what tennis is doing or trying to do as we analyze Madrid and talk on this Sunday while the men's final is happening. And I'm not going to blame myself for this scheduling snafu, even though that'd be easy, Bush, because I was the one who read the schedule. No, I'm going to direct my blame to somewhere else. Pass the buck. This tournament was way too freaking long. Why is this on at like 6 p.m. in Madrid?
Well, it is May in Madrid. It's not exactly cool there. So,
okay.
So I would suggest it does make sense to try and play in the evening when it is a little cooler. However, that being said, still, do they know what time we were trying to record today? Come on, people.
Jeez. It's raining. It's like schedule. 18 degrees. My God. Okay, get over it. But no, and I don't know if you want to do this off the hop, but I did really feel the toll of a prologue Masters experience this week. I thought the tournament, while enjoying some awesome moments, most especially on the WTA, which we're going to talk about at length today, probably more so than the men, and rightfully so. But overall, way too damn long, really hard to get locked in on a narrative or maybe strict to following a certain player because you're not quite sure when they're going to play. I saw multiple people express this kind of sentiment online as well, Bush. I'm curious how you're feeling about it because, like, personally, the idea that Madrid and Rome are 2 months or a month basically is a bit nuts, and it kind of kills this sprint to the French Open that we typically feel.
I agree with you. I think the one part that stuck out with me more than anything was the sort of muscle memory of sports watching and the idea that you're able to comfortably, or the idea that you should be slipping into a pair of comfy slippers and know exactly what's going on, right? The date that things are happening, the time that things are happening. It's, box office viewing. You feel comfortable in knowing what the schedule is, all this kind of stuff. And I think that really helps to elevate the game in general. That's clearly not the case what's happening in tennis. It's a bit challenging to follow it. And I think you have to go out of your way sometimes to figure out what tournament is on, what time it's on, why certain rounds are being played on a Wednesday in one tournament and, on a Sunday in another tournament. It seems very, very strange. So I think from a reform standpoint, that clearly needs to be addressed. I also agree with you. This tournament felt like it lasted forever. That's probably due to the fact that everyone pulled out of it, or that you had matches finishing midpoint. We just had a ton of storylines, which I think is good for the overall excitement of the sport. Or maybe from a news standpoint, it's more interesting, the actual event of people pulling out. But it did feel like a very, very long 2 weeks, this one.
Yeah, and I think some of the news is like kind of debating why people are pulling out or saying like, hey, is this because the calendar is a bit different this year and you also have the Olympics later and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, like people are maybe not even respecting true injuries or acknowledging that players may be hurt and that this might not just be a a business decision. But yeah, I don't know. It's too long, and this is the future. Like, it's not going to go back. You know, like when you say they're going to address this, Simon, like the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to only increase. It's just going to happen in more tournaments. So I don't know. I think as a someone who watched the sport for a while, you're totally right. Muscle memory is so locked in that I was quite upset by my little routine being disrupted. But
potentially,
yeah.
Potentially it is worth just evaluating that very, very briefly, or unpacking that idea of whether this will ever change. Because remember a few weeks ago, I talked about some of the buckets that could potentially make change in the sport of tennis. This purely, to me, seems like a labor issue. I think there's no desire for the tournaments to roll this back. Doesn't seem like the tour's that interested, other than just from the standpoint of trying to separate the two tours into that prestige area. But I think even from that standpoint, it didn't seem like there was a desire to reduce the number of matches played by the top players. I think if you looked at the schedule, it still ended up with them playing roughly the same amount of matches, the top 30, top 50. So from that standpoint, it doesn't look like it would change a huge amount. I think it purely comes down to whether or not the labor body that is men's and women's tennis feel like they want to take this on as an issue. And I think when you're ever asking to reduce a schedule and in essence reducing the number of matches and potential money that people can earn on a tour where sometimes it can be challenging for the bottom end of the tour to make a living, I think you're going to be really, really hard pressed to make that as a selling point. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing maybe players that you wouldn't expect be a little more vocal about this than before. I think Elena Rybakina has talked about this, but you're totally right. And I think the players are in a position with all of these things in flux and all these big sums being bandied about. How much power will they have in structuring this new tennis setup? What will the PTPA be able to do for the players? I think Vasek Pospisil was on the Match Point podcast recently, which is worth a listen. But that's a big deal too, because I think the players making it known that they're not down or they are in favor is the big step forward. Let's get to the tennis, Simon, and let's talk about the women's final, which was a repeat of last year. Last year's was excellent. I think we chose it as one of our favorites. I don't know if there was a consensus. I think even you, Bush, had some qualms with giving it the status we did in 2023, but this matchup is fantastic. We've seen it time and time again, but I don't think there's a debate about the quality of the 2024 edition of Swiatek Sabalenka in Madrid. This was excellent stuff.
Yeah, no questions for me. I think this is the best match of 2024 on the women's side. I think it's arguable whether it's the best tennis match on either side of the tour as well this season. It had everything you could possibly want. It had levels of incredible quality. It had some fairly dismal parts of it as well, which I think helped with the narrative side of it.
Drama, yeah.
The drama side of it, exactly. What more could you want at the back end of this than the two best players in the world going toe-to-toe, multiple match points, multiple championship points, some bizarre breaks of serve, some incredible highs. It was amazing. It was a great advertisement for the sport, and it was maybe potentially, I think I'd have to go back and check the list here. I think it might be the best match between the two of them as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Iga digging crazy deep, saving 3 championship points, lasting 3 hours and 11 minutes. I think Josh made a great point on the Discord as usual, but and you pointed out Jill Kravis, who was on the commentary, who's excellent broadcaster, one of the better recently retired pros, added to the ranks. That's been just a great source of information and knowledge. But I kind of destroying the myth of Iga being maybe a toolsy player or a variety player. She's got incredible weapons. And I think this match kind of starting off the way it did. I mean, best returner in the world, always talking about Novak, etc., and rightfully so. But currently, Iga, men or women, best returner in the world. I think that's fair, maybe.
Oof. That's an interesting question. I wonder what the data says about that. I'm curious. I need to go and look at that. Now you've presented that question to me. I'm very curious. So on the surface, I will say sure, but with a caveat that I'd like to go and check that.
Just on the first, that Sabalenka was serving crazy well. Like, it was not like Sabalenka was not in with her A game service wise, but I thought Swiatek, at least in the first set, was insane. Like that was top drawer stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And it's, I think, a testament to the fact that how well Sabalenka has improved as a player, that despite her first serve being eroded into, like the Swiatek is able to make good penetrating returns. Sabalenka is such a good player at this point. And she isn't just like a one-track kind of thing where she's able to just overpower her opponents. She is able to hang in these clay court rallies. And this is against the best clay courter in the world. I don't think there's any doubt about that side of things. Like, she is able to dictate points and stay in long rallies as well. So, testament to how much she's improved as a player.
A couple ways we can go with this one. I mean, I didn't realize that this was the one big clay title Iga hadn't won, which seems a bit nuts. But the other thing is that she's 22 and still in the beginning arc of her career. But I think this rivalry has grown a bit as well, Simon, and we've seen some progression in both these players' games since last year and last year's final. I think you mentioned Sabalenka's game evolving. Like, I think the mental fortitude and the way that she was able to fight back in the second set, and also just generally, I think Aryna Sabalenka's tools or ability to play has never been really questioned. And it was some questions about between the ears and whether or not she can kind of dig in when it's not going right, especially against the top of the top. But that was an incredible example of how far she's come as well. And I guess if there was concerns about whether or not she could respond to losing a final this dramatic and having 3 championship points, I'm far less concerned about that now than I would have been a year ago, for sure. Or maybe probably a bit longer than that, but she's come a long way.
Totally. And I think it's also reasonable to say, like, what a ridiculous display of mental fortitude to go through the emotional roller coaster that she's had in 2024 as well, to continue to play at a high level, to ride those waves of emotion that are devastating. They're really devastating. To go through what she's been through this year is crazy. Like, it's the kind of thing that if you put yourself in that situation, whether or not you'd want to show up to work, and then you throw into the fact also that you have 10,000 people watching you do your job at the same time, and you have to do a bunch of travel, all those other things to continue to compete at a high level. I'm kind of in awe of that, honestly, to continue to go doing what she does under the circumstances.
And I mean, another complaint for the Madrid Open, but for this tournament too, I think kind of blatantly treat the women as a second tier, and they've done so for many years. So I'm not saying other tournaments are necessarily way better, but I think they're clearly doing more than Madrid. And the fact that you've had so many players come out and say how messed up this is, like the fact that they couldn't speak during their trophy presentations of the doubles, when you had such a high profile finalist, Goff, Pegula, Azarenka, Haddad, Maia last year. That was the case again this year. And I mean, it's so gallingly obvious when you see something like this yesterday that these are the best of the best, and these are the people you got to promote, and these are the people you have to treat just as equals to the men, because Lord knows we'll talk about them, but this was the final. This was the match of all matches at Madrid. This was the reason you wanted to get a ticket to be there on that day for the whole 2 weeks or however long this lasted, right? Like, this was the box office, full stop. And there was no debate about it by the end. So maybe they'll get it together one day, but with the leadership in charge there in Madrid, I doubt it, right? But I think just yet another example. Like, we got just an incredible display over these 3 hours, and I wonder if it'll do anything to move the people in charge over there.
Probably not. I think this is the highest, like, out of everything on the tour. There's very few matches that you would pick over it from a sponsor's perspective and from a television audience perspective as well. Like, there's probably a very short list of players, certainly not on the women's side. I mean, how many players? Serena Williams, who's basically retired or has retired. Slip of the tongue there. I mean, who else? Naomi Osaka basically is another name that you throw in there against either of these two players. And that's kind of it, right? I don't know which other players you're going to be picking over them for cream of the crop from a perspective of who the WTA would put up on offer as a high level final here. That doubles thing is just ridiculous. It really is. It's kind of disgraceful, honestly.
It's literally like they're shoving them off the stage at an award, like an Oscars, like it's so, and for the amount of time wasted on other things at these events. And I mean, the semifinal between Rybakina and Sabalenka, if we didn't even have this final, we could talk about that for half an hour as well. Like, it was great. It was really great.
Remember the point always about how sponsors feel about sporting events and how like advertisers feel about sporting events is very different than how you as a fan feels about them. Where you as a fan are there like, oh, obviously I'm there to go and watch the event, and the sponsors are like, no, you're here to watch the ads, and there is just so happens to be a tennis match being played.
If I have to hear the president of Kia Australia say another thing in my lifetime, Lord help me. Lord help me. I don't give a damn about the new Kia Rio and its features for 2025. Awesome stuff, Bush. It was great. Yeah, you said it really well about Sabalenka, and I thought her remarks, like she's got it. She's really impressive. And Iga, man, like this is setting up for a really fun stretch here, heading into Rome and heading into a really important couple months for the tour, obviously, but for Iga as well, who 100 weeks at number one, 20th career title. She's got Madrid now, but she's got Roland Garros, Rome, Stuttgart in her back pocket. Few things left to prove, except now kind of building on this sort of this game that is evolving before our eyes. But I'm curious, Simon, like what about Iga has kind of changed for you over the last year or so? Because I know you've been watching her really closely from the beginning, and I think for me, it is that refusal to maybe be classed as a variety player, and she's refusing to do that by her game or letting her game speak, because it's just really impressive from both wings.
Yeah, and it's the serve as well. I think that's the biggest thing, right? It's obviously the most clear and obvious thing from an aesthetic standpoint is the change in the mechanism, the more abbreviated serve motion. It was the biggest weakness in her game, like the ability for players to pick on second serve, even first serve in some occasions. And I think that continues to be a work in progress. I don't think this is a finalized version of her on first or second serve, which again, I think is kind of scary. I don't think there's been a huge amount of change in her from a ground stroke perspective. If one thing I think you could say is that she has got a little more patient in terms of when she is pulling the trigger. And I think part of the aspect of being at the top of the sport is understanding but your level is going to drop sometimes, and you are going to have to hang in rallies, and you're not going to be able to go for broke on every single ball. And it's about just finding a rally ball and a length that is going to force an error from your opponent as opposed to having to blast winners past them. I think she's done that in spades. I think she's just such a good thinking player out there. Like her mindset is excellent, and I think that shows in her results. The thing is, though, like the players around her have got better as well. Like I don't think she is the clear and outright favorite in every tournament that she goes into. Although I do think that is the case on clay. The field has caught up a little bit, and I think that creates a really compelling narrative for the rest of the season.
Anything else on the women's side, Bush, in Madrid?
I mean, you mentioned some of the stats about her as well, and I think a lot of stuff is going to be written about her because of the 100 weeks at world number one. I think we tend to forget how much she's won and how young she is. I know you mentioned that she is young, but she is only 22 years of age. It's crazy the quantity of things that she's won already. If she keeps going at like the same pace, she's going to be the most decorated player of all time. Maybe not in Grand Slam count, but in terms of all the other things, I think she has every shot at hoovering up just a crazy number of tournaments. I know like these things don't really translate through eras, right? Because you're going to have situations where you have players who have crazy number of tournament wins and all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about like the modern iterations of it since the Masters
right.
and the Premier events got introduced in 2009. Like from that point onwards, she's clearly going to be the most dominant player of all time by that metric. And it goes to show like she is the most complete player on the women's side since that introduction was made of those tournaments.
It's phenomenal stuff. Iga Swiatek, winner in Madrid. When we come back after the break, we'll do parting shots. We'll talk about the men, the 9,000 withdrawals, the lucky winner, Felix Auger-Aliassime, and his counterpart, Andrei Rublev, in the final, plus plenty more coming up next. Welcome back to the Open Air podcast. I mentioned due to the janky scheduling in Madrid this week, we are recording as the men's final is going down for truly a bizarre week in which the top men's players withdrew for various reasons. Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, Daniil Medvedev. Did I miss anyone? Bush? Probably I did.
Yuri Lehecka.
I think Mensik withdrew. That's right. Lehecka. Anyone who encountered Felix basically withdrew out of fear, and I get it because he's back, baby. And I do want to say, before this all happened, and before he placed a very clearly sick Andre Rublev in the final, who, as I'm watching this, probably should withdraw as well. I don't know how this is continuing. He beat Casper Ruud, Bush. He beat an informed Casper Ruud. He looked a bit knackered himself, but I think no matter what happens here, you can take some positive things away from Felix, because he's been in the abyss for a bit. He's been a bit forgotten as well. And I saw an interesting kind of conversation on a Discord, Vivek, friend of the show, saying like, it's hard to get up again for this kind of rebirth of Felix, and especially under these circumstances. But what do you say? First Canadian to win a Masters 1000, potentially lowest ranked champ in tournament history, potentially. Roof closed will help him. How much does this matter?
Oh, that is such a hard question to answer, isn't it? Is this just a random Masters event? Is this just one of those where it's everyone else lost and he happened to just get a nice, straightforward path? Like, look at his run to this final. He's had 3 retirements.
Oh, it's blessed. It's the most blessed.
And a dude who's coming off the back of just winning a title and who was shagged. And then he's playing Andre Rublev in the final, who we think is sick and also is not exactly the person who is the most well known for getting over the line in major finals either. So if you were going to write up a story and a path of the way that someone would win a first Masters 1000 title, it would probably be this way. This is not blowing the doors off his opponents in any capacity. So I don't know. Like, all that being said, people will clown this title if he wins it. It still matters. I mean, he still won.
They will. It does. And I will argue it matters a lot. It matters a lot because either way, his ranking is improved immensely. I think he's back in the top 20, which is big. It's big. Like I think Felix is a big confidence player. Not to say that a lot of people aren't. Like if you're playing like shit for a while, it's going to manifest itself in I think your training in some other ways. But to build on something, and I think you could see it from the Nishioka match and the Mannarino match, especially from his box, who I think understand maybe how important this juncture of Felix's career is at 23, and maybe off the high that comes with being a fresh face on the scene with a lot of game. Like this is now the hard yard territory, and how much are you going to put it and how much can you get out of it? And I think you're seeing a great kind of reward for just sticking around and being involved and being available and benefiting from some other players withdrawing and then taking care of business against an opponent again in the final who looks way off the pace. So I think it matters. I honestly, at the end of the day, people will look back and say he was the first to ever do this from Canada, and he was the young, still a player who can really grow and build off this. So he got lucky, but damn, like I feel like he deserves it, kind of, in a way.
Sure, I think take your wins anyway. I mean this sincerely. Take your wins any way you can get them. It is hard to get match wins on the ATP Tour, and it's really damn difficult to win a Masters 1000, no matter what happens. Like you look at the number of players who have not been successful at that level of tournament. It's just the level is so high that to win one of those tournaments, regardless of how it happens, you have earned it. Although, if ever there was going to be a caveat of someone winning a first title at that level, it would probably be this one, given the field that he's had to go up against. But then again, you know, 2-seeded players, he had to get by them, all that kind of stuff. It's not nothing. This.
It's not his fault. Yeah, I honestly, I mean, once again, this tournament felt a bit cursed in the beginning. So I mean, it feels right that this is the final, and you have a very compromised Rublev. But shouts to Felix because he stuck in there and he was rewarded heavily for it. It's not a small deal, you know. Like they made these Masters 1000 so prominent, and I mean that you didn't draw it up this way, but hell, celebrate. I mean, the way it's going, and again, we can talk Rublev, but like This is about to be 5-1 Felix in the first set. If he does turn this around, just in case, we'll place this in the pod. The greatest comeback by a clearly ill man who is dry heaving in between points. But I saw this question as well being bandied about online. Who the hell is the favorite for the French Open right now? Like, do you? I
do. Yeah, I think it's Novak Djokovic. I think very clearly it is.
Isn't that a bit funny? It's a bit funny that we're back here.
Do you remember the Mario Party GIF, like the meme that was out a while ago, where it's all four of them on the rolling balls on the ice tower, and like the level starts and everyone falls off except the Mario character? That's kind of how I feel about this French Open, where everyone just has fell apart and Novak's like, well, that was easy. Jesus.
I guess I'm here. Yeah, I guess I'll do it. It's a good question. I mean, you mentioned no one's playing in Rome. No Sinner, no Alcaraz. Novak is there, which is interesting. But yeah, a question to think about amongst yourselves, dear listener. Who is the favorite on the men's side for the French Open? Because Lord knows, I don't know. I do not know who I would pick today. I wouldn't feel good about it in any way. I mean, you could probably put Andre Rublev in that conversation, depending on how well he is. But out of the people who actually had to play a bunch of tennis this week, I thought Rublev looked really good against Fritz, looked good against a compromised Alcaraz. Like, wouldn't be surprised if he is one of those people that can make it deep in Paris, Simon. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to read too much into this final at this moment.
It certainly is. I think maybe just for both of them, right? For both dudes, this means more, perhaps, individually to them than I think the tennis community as a whole will view this tournament.
Yeah.
Which I think...
It's a friends and family final.
It is. And I think that sounds almost patronizing. I don't mean it that way. Like, these tournaments matter individually to get up, regardless of how it happens. But I think the rest of the tour will probably clown this a little bit, and the wider sport will be for the pair of them. But you look individually on the narratives. Felix, it's an awful 18 months since he's been really like at peak form, been through injury, complete loss of confidence. I think he's lost his serve entirely. And I think statistically as well, it's the worst serving season he's had since he's come on tour, which I think is not it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to win matches when you're serving like that on first serve. And on the Rublev side of things, I mean, that's the narrative that's been tied to him forever. You know, forever the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like, never going over the line in the big tournaments, never won at this level, all that kind of stuff. Never got past a particular stage of the Grand Slam level. We said it for Felix, right? I remember saying this exact thing when Felix had lost his 10th final in a row. Like, he just needed one off his arse, and maybe that eventually would help bring, you can walk into a tournament and they announce you as, a Masters 1000 champion, or you can walk back into Madrid next year, defending champion, all that kind of stuff. It seems small to us, and we might laugh at it, but like, if you are in that situation, you've never won one of those things, and then someone's like, okay, now you've done that thing. Okay, maybe I can do it again. Maybe you just forget all the stuff of how you got there, and you're able to actually accept the high points of it.
Totally. No, I think you're bang on, and the corpse of Andre Rublev has somehow broken Felix here. So yeah, congrats to whoever takes this. This is grim. Might want to turn on a replay of the WTA final if you're watching this live.
This is our version of a watch along, by the way.
This is a watch along. I do love how Felix got all these breaks, and then it was raining, so they closed the roof where he is a demon indoor. It's all set up, man. The fix, whatever.
I should mention, of course, like, second Masters 1000. I said first. Second for Andre Rublev to Monte Carlo.
Yes. Anything else on the men, Bush, from Madrid? Yeah, 88. Just everyone withdrawing. You got Clay, Laura Fritz, which was fun. Francisco Cherundolo's forehand breaking sound barriers. That was fun as well. But overall, bit of a disaster here on the ATP. You had Nadal catching fire a bit, looked like old Nadal against De Minaur, looked like a very old man against Lehecka, asking for the Bayern Munich Real Madrid score during the match, which I found wonderful. Anything for you to take away on the
Never ever look like he was losing his mind several points during this tournament. He's having some very fun arguments with umpires. I think the dude just does not like playing on clay and finds ways to motivate himself in other capacities. So I thought that was interesting. I just felt so bad for Lehecka as well to get arguably the biggest win of his career despite who he was playing against and all the circumstances around it, and then just to have a freak injury like that as well. It sucks. It sucks because I think he could have made the final here. I really do.
Yeah, might have liked his chances against Felix in that match, but yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, weird tournament, way too long. But this is the future, yay! And that's the closure on Madrid. For parting shots, Simon, let's get right into it. Doubles in Madrid. This is part of more of the future in tennis.
You will have to forgive me for being a bad podcast host here, and I tried my hardest on this one. What is the rule here on this new format where they're allowing a pathway for singles players to play in the doubles? I don't know if you know it, but like I don't understand it of how this actually works, whether or not it's a protected spot in the draw or like how late you had to register or how to qualify. That being like, there was limited details about how I could understand this. That being said, it did produce a winner. Like it worked in that capacity. Jordan Thompson and Sebastian Korda won this. They obviously were unseeded. They came through. They beat a bunch of very good doubles pairings to win this title. They were good value for it. So there was, what a shitty segment I'm about to say to people, but I apologize for this. There was a thing that happened which allowed for singles players to play in this doubles, and it was won using that path. I just can't tell you more details about what that path was because it was unclear to me, which, again, might be a me thing, but it might also be a tennis thing. You can never really tell on these things.
Is the path that it's quicker so that it'll be less of a time commitment for the top players? Is that the idea here?
Maybe? Is that what it is?
Yeah. It sounds like it. It sounds and over 5 days. So I guess if it happens earlier in the tournament, it's like better for the top guys to like get practice in. I don't know. I also had a bit of a struggle attempting to parse this, but the quotes from this were from like doubles guys, like guys who were at the top of the doubles game, Matt Ebden and Jamie Murray, and it did feel a bit like, I don't know, this is like the 80th time they tried to T20ize tennis, but make everything quicker, make it a bit UTS-y in terms of like the changeovers and how much time you have. There is too much dead time probably in general, but whether or not this is a game changer, like Jamie Murray made the point that like they're just not promoting doubles in general. Like it's one thing to change the formats, but they probably need to do some other stuff to get this on people's radars, because overall it's just not something they devote time to, whether it's on social or on the broadcast. So
it's true.
I don't know, man. Like I think getting more singles players to play doubles makes sense. It's an Olympic year. It's going to matter. People will care a lot about that. So it's a great time to capitalize on that, because you're having these teams form, right? So it makes sense to try and do something. But I'm glad. I guess this is another example where I'm glad they're trying something, but I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah, me too. I think the pithy answer here is, instead of making more singles players play doubles, get more doubles players to play doubles. I think that's probably a solution for growing that sport. But yes, I am glad to at least see some innovation here. It did lead me to an interesting point though, Dev. If we're going to see some more weird and interesting pairings here, if you could pick two players in the top 50 on the men's side to pair together to make a run, let's say at Rome or next Masters 1000, what's the strangest pairing that you could pick from a doubles perspective that would be so random?
Oh, God.
Should I tell you mine to start with?
Yeah, let's hear it.
My two players that I would pair together are Novak Djokovic and Adrian Manarino.
Okay. Why?
I just think two players that do not want to be at the net at all ever. I think it would just be hilarious to watch both of them playing 9 feet behind the baseline, or just trying to play ultra defensive in a style that's never really been seen to be successful in doubles. I think it would be comical, and also very different personalities as well.
I'm setting up my team to win, so I'm gonna. You can do really well with that team. Those jokers. I'm gonna go Struff and Eubanks. Big lads, a lot of wingspan.
They might actually do well.
Yeah, I think you could win. I think you could win a big title with those guys. All right, Boris Becker, Simon. He's no longer bankrupt.
Yeah, Boris Becker is no longer bankrupt. I had a joke written here, Dev, so allow me this. The headline of the BBC article, Boris Becker, no longer bankrupt, comma, court says. However, still arsehole.
I mean, yeah.
That's all I wanted to say about this.
I
wanted my bit in here, and that's it.
That's all I got as well. All right, Daria Kasatkina giving guarantees on safety of gay players in Saudi. Far more serious, but very interesting from Russell Fuller, Simon.
It was, and I think this is going to come much more into focus as we get to the back end of the season, and given who are the players that are going to be qualifying for the WTA Tour finals. So, I mean, you said it off the top, like Kasatkina, obviously gay, one of the very few openly gay players on the tour, given guarantees about her personal safety. This is obviously in line with some of the human rights watchdogs, which have had some very pointed comments about Saudi Arabia and also the WTA finals taking place in that country. This is a story that I think I'll continue to watch with interest to see how it develops, because there's a potential for something really bad to happen here in terms of how the sport can be viewed, because this is such a prestigious tournament and the steps that they have taken. And this is not footballers being bought and sent to Saudi Arabia to play in those leagues. Like, this is as we have mentioned many, many times, the WTA is at its core, a protest organization, and one I think with that has social justice at its heart. And I think if anything was to happen here, or for a circumstance to happen that is problematic, then that is not just a terrible look about the WTA, but I think gets to the very heart of why it exists as an organization to begin with. So it's not a good situation when one of your top players is having to give in guarantees about their safety to an attended event. That is fucking awful. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I'll preface this by saying I really back Kasatkina, and I love what she's brought to tennis, both on court and off. And I get why she would say things like, we see that the Saudis are now very into sport. They want to develop the sport. And as long as it gives the opportunity to see to the people there and to the young kids and to women to actually see the sport so that they can watch it, that they can play it, they can participate in this, I think it's great. And then she's saying, I've been given guarantees. Like, I don't blame her at all, but I do also think it's a bit morbid that we're like, this player, this one person has been told they'll be okay because they are part of this tour that's coming to sports wash a bit. Like, that's not a great sign of anything, is it? Like, oh, okay, this one person will be protected because it'll look bad if she's not. But otherwise, ho hum. Like, it's kind of bleak to me, So I don't blame Kasatkina really for taking this stance. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to feel positive about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly the labor question of whether or not you're sending someone into a situation that's dangerous, which is obviously terrible for them from a labor perspective. But then there's don't disconnect that from what that actually means and what that actually says, is that this one player is okay, but there's other people in this country that are not, and just objectively are not. Like, you can look at any research which has come out from either the UN or human rights watchdogs that, yes, these are this is a state that does not allow for homosexual people, gay people, part of the LGBT community to freely live their lives, and are constantly living in fear, which is not good in 2024, or ever, in fact.
Well said, Kasatkina as well, Bush, with the vlog of Madrid. No surprise there.
If you've been following Dasha Kasatkina's YouTube series for a while, it's pretty cute. It does the rounds. It's a really interesting look behind the scenes. You get to know her personality a bit more. I think it's a good watch in terms of sort of stitching together the week that she's part of. You get to know some players a little better, see behind the scenes, how they all kind of coalesce and how they act together. I think there was one moment which caught some people's attention this week with an interaction with Kalinskaya, where effectively I think Dasha Kasatkina is saying, like, there's no snakes on tour, and Kalinskaya interrupts him and says, yeah, there absolutely is, 100%.
She's like, yeah, there's some
I think
words.
The sort of shocked look on both Katakina and Camila Osario's face when that happens is like, wow, that's brutally honest to say on camera. Yeah, I'm curious. Name names. We would love to know. We're all ears.
You had Osorio in there drinking a smoothie as well, loving it.
She seems like an incredibly nice person. The few times that she's shown up on, she seems like a very nice person.
Great content. Challengers, have you seen it yet?
I have not seen it yet. It's on my agenda to watch next week. I am currently attending a different film festival, so I'd like to see it.
Same. I haven't seen it yet either, but we should definitely probably bring on some of our Discord friends to talk about it. But Petkovic has weighed in.
Yeah, Andrea Petkovic was writing in The Guardian. And I think one of the things that stood out from this article was effectively how the director of the film went to painstaking lengths to depict the life of professional tennis. Her article was written basically saying, like, it's done very well, apart from the sexiness, which I think is a very good headline, by the way, it should be said. I want to get into this without actually seeing the film. I don't want to speak too out of turn here. However, like the idea of seeing a film that actually wrestles with what it feels like to be a professional tennis player and the ups and downs and the sort of grittiness that comes with that, whilst at the same time injecting a load of sexy romance in it, does seem quite cool. I'm kind of down to watch that. It seems pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's very funny to me that this has done more for tennis than whatever the hell that Netflix thing was called, Breakpoint or whatever. It's like, this has been way more. Everyone's talking about it. Yeah. I read the review. I found it funny and good, but still got to check it out. Discord is on fire talking about it.
Shockingly enough, Dev, Zendaya, more interesting than Stefanos Tsitsipas.
Yeah.
Shocking, I know.
Yeah. Speaking of, I had to get this in here. End of an era. Steph Tsitsipas and Paula Badosa are no more. Paula Badosa on IG stories with a statement that definitely reads like they are a law firm that are separating or something, or like some sort of, not a lot of love in this statement, but yeah, it's over. Favorite memories from Pau Tsitsipas?
Steph Dosa.
Steph Dosa.
Favorite memories has to be the box, doesn't it? Has to be the box of Paula Badosa side-eyeing Apostolos Tsitsipas. It was just too perfect. You're going to draw a straight line between something and this breakup. It might be that moment.
Yeah, another bad mark for Breakpoint, because this was the thing that happened. Maybe is why it happened, actually. If you put a tinfoil hat on, as Luke does, I think, in the Discord. It's true. Open your eyes, people. Okay, that's it for me. You got anything else, Simon?
Not tennis related, no. 2 challenges remaining. Do you want to go first here?
Here's our live update is Felix is really struggling to close out this first set against Zombie Rublev. So, oh God.
It really is going to be a live watch along.
2 challenges remaining. What do you got?
Okay. So I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. I will say that ahead of time. My 2 challenges remaining is the Toronto Maple Leafs. So,
God, get out of here. Greg, cut his mic. Cut it.
So I will say, first and foremost, I was watching Game 7 with my partner. My partner is from Northern Ontario. Her family is all Maple Leafs fans. So I'm clearly not, and don't really care about the result of this game. Like, I'm just watching as a neutral. But that family is invested in it. So by proxy, I'm watching and sort of hoping for their happiness here. Sport is so weird, Dev. It's just incredibly weird if you look at the results of what the Maple Leafs have over the last 3 decades. The only reason I wanted to bring it up here is just it's a remarkable record of, at some point you would have thought that luck would have broken this streak. It's just so crazy for a market that is so powerful in the sport to have the eyes and the interest and basically everything you could possibly have. And good teams as well. Like, it's not like these are bad teams. Yeah, you can talk about roster construction and everything, but it's just a very, and it is a reminder maybe that sport is not always exactly as you think it is. It's just it's a weird thing. Yeah,
I mean, I think I am. This one didn't hurt me as much as stuff in the past, but I think it's because I'm fully in apathy mode when it comes to the Maple Leafs. And to be honest, with like the Bills too. Like I fully don't think it's going to happen. So it's changed a bit. And I guess like real life stuff has happened too. But yeah, it was strange. Like it's very lucky, very random. You need some breaks. I mean, but in the other sense, like I'm watching Arsenal this year and maybe they win the title, but they probably won't. And like, even if they don't, I had a lot of good times like watching them. And I think in the end, like my experience committing my time to stuff, like how am I feeling in the moment is how I'm going to maybe choose to spend my time going forward. Cause like, honestly, the Leafs at this point, it's torture. It's torture. And it's not something that it's worth doing anymore, for me. So.
No, totally. I think part of the reason I wanted to bring this up is I think it's against the backdrop of seeing sort of Leeds fall apart at the back end of the season as well. And just the randomness that gets inserted to playoff style or like knockout style competition versus a league format. And, I grew up in the UK. I love leagues. I love the idea of a table, like over a period of time. It's objectively true that this team is the best. Like they got the most amount of points. They figured it out. And that is the great equalizer in all of this thing. It's not about how someone competes in one-off games, which there's many different arguments around why you do playoffs and knockout competitions, and they have a purpose in other capacities. But just purely on objective basis, I just love table so much. I just love the format, and I think that's why I'm able to sit here and be like, hey, the two teams that went up and they got promoted, it fucking sucks at least didn't do that, but they won more points. Like, whatever. What can you do about that? You can't claim they got lucky in one game.
The other thing is like it wasn't like I thought the Leafs this year were going to a cup contender, like there was some clear flaws. So it definitely wasn't like this was the year feeling, whereas that might have probably changed things. Like I will say, kind of want your Oilers to kill the Canucks because I dislike Vancouver Canucks fans again. So please, Simon, take care of business.
It's going to be a very strange next 2 weeks for me being in hostile and enemy territory.
Be safe out there. Be safe down there. Hockey, man. NHL, very random, very stupid how the game changes so much in the playoffs. But this is a very weird one. I didn't watch that much and I felt better off for it. And I think this is kind of a sign for me going forward, which is a bit scary. And I think it's also kind of tied into with some lifestyle changes I'm making as well. And I don't know, it's not hitting as hard as it used to.
Is that also your 2 challenge remaining?
Yeah, it is. I'm just going to, because we've talked long enough, I'm going to put it in there. Sports are dumb and random. And if things go your way, be thankful. Like the Raptors thing, a lot of things went their way too, and it probably won't happen again. So let's just be thankful and grateful and enjoy the ride when we can, because it's dumb, right?
Maybe
it's kind of dumb.
Is that a perfect summarization of this tournament in Madrid as well? Like us saying you need a bit of luck. Right? Talk about 2 players that need a bit of luck.
I'm watching Felix try to hold for this first set, and I think you've said it. You've said it so perfectly, and that'll sum it up for us. A reminder: we are on Patreon.com/open air. Join us there. Get the show ad free. Get it early on Sundays. Plus, join the best tennis Discord around, where we're talking tennis and movies, challengers, all the time. We're also on X/Twitter, Open Air Pod. Follow us there for some sporadic tennis thoughts. For our producer, Greg, who is back. Welcome back, Greg. We missed you, man. Thanks for joining us. For Greg and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next time.